Okay. Good afternoon, students. So today we'll be dealing with the topic respiration process. We know the process of taking in food. The food is digested, and after the digestion of the food, energy is released in our body cells so that they can carry out various processes. Plus, the carbon dioxide and water are also produced as byproducts. And this process of release of energy from the food taken by us is called as respiration process. Now, there is another term, breathing, which is often used in close association with respiration. Actually, breathing and respiration are processes combined. Actually, the respiration process, it also includes the breathing process. So the breathing, it is a physical process and no chemical reaction takes place during this process. During the initial state of respiration, what we do, we take in air or the oxygen inside the lungs, and this physical process is called as breathing. While when this oxygen, it diffuses into the cells, and then with the help of this oxygen, the oxidation of food or the glucose takes place, which leads to the release of energy, and carbon dioxide and water as byproducts are released. This is a chemical process and energy is released in this process. So this process of release of energy, diffusion of gases, from the diffusion of gases to the oxidation of food, is a chemical reaction and is called as respiration. Now what happens? The respiration, it is generally of two types. First is the aerobic respiration. As the name suggests, the aerobic respiration, it takes place in the presence of oxygen, which means when the respiration, it takes place in the presence of oxygen, it is called as aerobic respiration. While the second type is the anaerobic respiration. Now what do you mean by anaerobic respiration? A means absent. So which means the type of respiration in which the oxygen is absent, which means the respiration which takes place, the respiration process which takes place in the absence of oxygen is called as anaerobic respiration. In the absence of oxygen. So these are basically two types of respiration and which takes place in different types of organisms. This anaerobic respiration, it takes place in mostly unicellular organisms such like yeast, while the process of aerobic respiration, it takes place in all the multicellular organisms like human, animals, etc. Now what actually is, if we define aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration chemically? So theoretically we studied that the process of release of energy from the food is called as respiration process. But what actually is food? You know, we take in food, and this food is in the form of carbohydrate, which is actually C6H12O6. Now what happens when we breathe in, the oxygen goes into our lungs, and from these lungs, this oxygen diffuses into the blood and reach out the cells where this food is present. So with this food, it combines with the oxygen. Now what happens? This process, the addition of oxygen to the food, it is called as the oxidation of food. So this oxidation of food takes place where? In the cytoplasm. Now this oxidation of food, it takes place and an intermediate compound is formed called as pyruvate. Now what happens when this pyruvate is also known as pyruvic acid? This is an intermediate product formed in a body. Now this C6H12O6 first turns into an intermediate product called as a pyruvate, and this pyruvate then breaks down into carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Now what happens? This C6H12O6 has also two mechanisms. If this C6H12O6 of food or glucose, this is the glucose or our food, is oxidized, if this process is taking place in the presence of oxygen, then this is known as aerobic respiration. So this is an example of aerobic respiration. The conversion of this glucose into pyruvate takes place in the cytoplasm, while the conversion of pyruvate to carbon dioxide, water and energy, it takes place in the mitochondria. So this is the example of aerobic respiration. Now what happens in anaerobic respiration? In anaerobic respiration, what happens is this C6H12O6, since there is no oxygen, the intermediate compound is formed, which is the same, that is the pyruvate or pyruvic acid. Now this pyruvate, in anaerobic respiration process, this pyruvate, it either gets converted into ethanol, which takes place in our muscles. When we run fast, what happens? We breathe faster. Why? Because we need more oxygen, we need more energy. What happens when we run fast? The more and more oxygen is needed by the body. But since we are running and we are doing a lot of vigorous physical exercise, the oxygen is not supplied to the body. So what happens? What happens is that this oxidation takes place in the absence of oxygen because we need energy. So what happens? This pyruvate, instead of getting converted into carbon dioxide plus H2O plus energy, it gets converted into lactic acid, which accumulates in the muscles, due to which our muscles pains when we do physical exercise. But in the case of plants, for example, when we water the plants too much, what happens? The respiration process of the roots is blocked out. And due to the respiration process of the roots is blocked out, what happens? They cannot carry out respiration. So anaerobic respiration starts carrying out. So what happens? In plants, this C6H12O6, it gets converted into pyruvate, and now instead of converting into lactic acid, it gets converted into ethanol and alcohol. And if this anaerobic respiration process continues, the accumulation of alcohol in the roots continues and the plants eventually dies. One more important thing, that in aerobic respiration process, this pyruvate was getting converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy plus 32 ATP molecules are produced in this process, which means a higher amount of energy is produced in the aerobic respiration process. But in anaerobic respiration process, only 2 ATPs are released. Now you will ask me, what is ATP? From where this ATP has come from? So now we will be dealing what is ATP, how this ATP is formed, how this process takes place. Now this ATP, this energy which is released, it is stored in the form of ATP in our body. Now what is ATP? ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So this adenosine triphosphate. There is another compound called as ADP. Now what is ADP? ADP is adenosine diphosphate. And PI is the inorganic phosphate groups which are present in the body. Inorganic phosphate. Now what happens in a body? ADP is present, that is adenosine diphosphate, ADP. ADP means diphosphate, di means 2. Now there are 2 phosphate groups. When the energy is released in the body, what happens? This phosphate group plus energy is used in this process, and this energy gets stored as ATP. So this is how ATP is formed. Now when we need energy, what happens? When this was the process when our body is releasing energy and we need to store the energy. This process takes place in the mitochondria. That's why the mitochondria is also known as the energy powerhouse of the cell. So what happens when we need energy? This ATP again, it gets converted into energy plus phosphate and ADP molecules. So this is how this process continues on and on. When we need to store energy, this ADP with the help of inorganic phosphate and the energy is used, ATP is formed. But when we need energy, this ATP breaks down, releasing energy plus inorganic phosphate and ADP process. So this was the process of the respiration in general. Now we will be dealing how the respiration process takes place in plants, in simple animals and in multicellular animals.